I'm home. My voice trembled a bit, even with this simple greeting. No response. It's been about 7 years since Laura was in high school. My family has been ignoring me the whole time. Laura glanced at me from the corner of her eye, avoiding direct contact with me. When she saw the bill in my hand, she slightly raised the corners of her mouth. I had just picked up the wedding bill that had fallen by the front door. Does this mean they expect me to pay it?
Dad, please don't cry at the wedding. It's embarrassing.
Well, I might. I changed your diapers, you know. Just the other day, you were a baby and are now getting married. I'm happy, but it's complicated. Another man taking you away. Any normal parent would cry.
Since I didn't feel like crying, does that make me not normal? Can I be done now? I muttered under my breath. But of course, no one paid any attention to me. It seems the time has come to let go of Laura. I am Amy Thompson, a housewife in my 50s. I've been married for 25 years, and soon, my only daughter, Laura, is getting married. How do most parents feel at times like this? Completely happy, or sad because their child is leaving the nest? Neither fit for me. I met my husband, Steve, at a diner. It was very close to my workplace, so I often stopped by. I got to know Steve, who worked there, and eventually he gave me his contact info, and we started dating. At that time, Steve was the manager of the diner, working from morning till night. Despite being busy, he called me almost every day.
Today, we had some annoying customers, but hearing your voice calms me down, Amy.
Listening to his complaints became a daily routine for me. Steve was very dedicated to his work and had a strong sense of responsibility. He never left the restaurant entirely to the part-timers, always taking the lead himself. It was a bit lonely that he had no time for dates because of his work, but I was also attracted to this serious side of him. After dating for a year, we got married. I'll be the one to support him closely from now on, since he tends to push himself too hard. I'll keep our place tidy and prepare healthy meals for him. It feels a bit old-fashioned and embarrassing, but I realized then that I really want to take care of the person I love. However, a few months after we got married, everything turned upside down right after I found out I was pregnant.
Oh, I quit my job.
What? One morning, I asked Steve, who was watching TV in his pajamas, "Are you off today?" and got an unexpected response. "Did you say you quit? What's up?" Seeing my shock, Steve shrugged and gave a slight smile.
I couldn't help it. It was too tough.
His voice was gloomy, yet somehow defiant. It's true, he had a demanding job. He must have been enduring a lot. But right now, I'm pregnant. Fear about the future kept spreading through my mind. Quitting his job out of the blue without even consulting me, with a baby on the way. What are we going to do? These words were stuck in my throat. But seeing Steve pleading about how tough it was, I held back from voicing my thoughts. It felt like suppressing a strong urge to vomit. I kept thinking I should say something kind first, but if I spoke carelessly, I might end up blaming him.
What's with your face? You look pissed because I quit my job without asking.
Even though I intended to hide it, my emotions must have shown on my face. I quickly pressed my lips together tightly.
All right, fine. I'll go back to work. If I talk to them now, they might let me retract my resignation. I guess I'm worthless unless I'm earning money. Sure, I'll work. Even if I might hang myself tomorrow because you're telling me to work.
I couldn't help but open my mouth. That's not. Steve waited for my next words, his eyes damp. It's okay. Don't push yourself. I couldn't possibly tell him to work under these circumstances. Your health is more important than anything. I barely managed to squeeze out the words. Steve nodded, looking satisfied. He's a responsible, serious person, so he got more exhausted than most. After a little break, I thought he would start working again for our family. Luckily, I also have a full-time job and plan to take maternity leave after giving birth. Until then, I can support him. But even when I reached the end of my pregnancy and I gave birth to our adorable child, Steve didn't go back to work.
Why don't you go back to work?
Shortly after giving birth, Steve made an unexpected suggestion.
Having you around the house with that gloomy face is annoying. Maybe you're not cut out for raising a kid? I'll take care of Laura, so you go back to work.
Who was going to take care of her? At that time, Steve hadn't changed a single diaper or fed her. He hadn't even held her properly.
I felt like you were always irritated, so I was scared to get close to Laura. I can handle it if you're not around.
With Steve pushing me to return to work and my worries about our finances, I reluctantly agreed. I went back to work before 3 months postpartum. To my surprise, Steve took good care of Laura. But whenever I got home from my work and tried to hold Laura, Steve would quickly take her away. He would then cuddle her in a showy way. By the time Laura started walking, she was completely attached to her dad. It's natural for her to be attached to the person she spends the most time with. Let's all go to the park. When I suggested it on a day off, Steve frowned.
What? If you have time to play, why not clean the house? There's dust piling up in the corners. Oh, right. People who don't take care of kids wouldn't notice that. You can't imagine our kid eating dust or feeling bad about a dirty place, can you?
Sure, the house was messy. Steve only took care of Laura. Apparently, housework was my job. I once tried to talk about sharing the chores, but Steve got furious.
You're dumping childcare on me and want me to do housework too? Wow, you must think you're living the high life. You look down on me just because you're earning money, right? That kind of old school dad attitude isn't acceptable anymore. Times have changed. Get it? Plus, you don't even earn as much as other dads. Yet you want to boss me around? Are you crazy?
When something bothered him, Steve would go on and on without letting me get a word in. Before I knew it, Steve took care of the baby. Work and house chores were my responsibilities. Laura, who was very charming as a toddler, started to develop a personality just like Steve's as she grew older. Laura, don't leave your bag and balled-up socks at the front door. When Laura comes home from elementary school, she throws off her socks at the door, drop her jacket in the hallway, and leave the cupboard open after grabbing a snack from the kitchen. She would munch on her favorite chips while heading to the living room, leaving a trail of crumbs. Laura was careless in many ways. You could always tell where she had been.
Whoever does the laundry should pick up the socks.
Laura said without taking her eyes off the game. Yelling wouldn't help, so I took a deep breath. Since I just got home from work, it's 7 p.m. Also, since your bag is by the door, you haven't done your homework yet, right? I'm about to make dinner, so why don't you finish it while I cook? It'll take me about 30 minutes to get dinner ready. Want to race to see who finishes first? I encouraged Laura while putting on my apron. In fact, her teacher had informed me that Laura wasn't doing her homework. I knew she'd rebel if I scolded her outright, so I tried to be gentle.
What? Dinner's going to take 30 minutes? I'm starving. That's unacceptable.
Laura widened her eyes and threw her game console. Steve, who had been napping nearby, also lifted his head at her outburst.
Hey, does dinner really take that long? You're totally useless.
Dad, I'm going to faint from hunger at this rate. She never makes the fried chicken I ask for, and she's always nagging me to eat veggies. It's definitely on purpose. I'm being abused.
Laura jumped into Steve's arms. She started crying and made me out to be the villain. It was the usual, but I knew she wasn't actually shedding any tears. It was fake crying. Steve should have realized it too, but he always took her side.
You're really a terrible person, aren't you? Don't you care about your own child?
Of course, I do. I responded immediately. It was because I loved her that I worried about her future and tried to guide her.
The other day, she even took away my game, saying I couldn't play.
Taking away a kid's toy is the worst.
That time, Laura had already been glued to the game for 3 hours and refused to eat her lunch sandwich, demanding chips instead.
When I skip school because I hate tests or sports, she finds out and gets super mad. Is she spying on me or something? It's creepy.
Stop thinking of Laura as your possession. Respect her feelings.
Steve is supposedly in charge of raising Laura, but I handle all communication with the school. He dumped it all on me, saying, "That's a mom's job. If Laura does something wrong outside, I'm the one who gets the call. But if I scold her, she cries and calls it abuse. Even when I just try to ask her about it, she's immediately combative. I'm at my wit's end." Spoiled by Steve, Laura is getting more and more out of control, and I worry about her future. Even if she rebels now, I keep hoping that one day she'll remember, Mom said this back then, and keep talking to her patiently. A turning point came when Laura was in high school. As she started noticing boys, she became much more ladylike in her behavior.
Laura is very charming and quite popular with the boys. She's also trusted by the girls and has been nominated for class president. Everyone likes her.
I was surprised when her high school teacher praised her so highly. I felt relieved, thinking that all the nagging and guidance over the years hadn't been in vain. I was genuinely happy, but her attitude at home got even worse. It was probably the backlash from being well-behaved outside. It seemed like she saw me as garbage, and her gaze was terribly cold.
Geez, it's annoying.
In the morning, Laura would enter the living room and click her tongue instead of saying, "Good morning." When I put the meal on the table, there's always a big sigh. "Ha, Laura, have a good day."
Huh? Get lost.
I always see her off at the front door, but all I get in return are hurtful words. She used to be incredibly sassy, but at least she talked to me, and I miss those days. It looks like it's going to rain heavily this evening. Be careful.
Geez, it's gross.
If I distance myself from Laura now, our parent-child relationship will truly fall apart. Just as her outward behavior drastically changed for the better as she grew, there will come a day when she'll treat me normally too.
When are you going to stop clinging to Laura? How long are you going to hover around her?
As I was seeing her off at the front door, Steve just got up. He was yawning with his messy hair.
Laura finds you annoying.
Of course, I knew she found me annoying, but I still saw her off. I knew if I overdid it, it would backfire, so I made sure not to skip this small gesture. To Steve and Laura, it might seem like I was lounging around in the morning, but I always ended up sprinting to the station to catch my train just in time.
Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Laura.
Hey, Dad, I'm going out with my friends on Sunday. Can you give me a ride to the station?
Sure, got it.
Seeing them chat so casually made my heart ache. Steve seemed to sense my complicated feelings and smirked at me.
Poor Mom. Want to know how to get Laura to like you?
Really, how? I had a glimmer of hope.
Work more. Laura really appreciates money, so you should focus on earning. Maybe if you give her more allowance, she'll respect you.
It was indeed an easy way to get liked.
Yeah, then I'll respect you. It's annoying when you say stuff like use money wisely.
The best thing is to just hand over the money without saying anything. Saying stuff like, a high schooler doesn't need a $1,000 bag is really annoying.
I didn't preach to Laura all the time, but I couldn't just spoil her and let her do whatever she wanted. Parents need to teach their kids what's wrong. Laura clicked her tongue and exchanged glances with Steve. I didn't think I said anything strange, but I bit my lip, feeling unsure. Maybe it was from that point on. Steve and Laura began to completely ignore me. No matter how much I tried to talk to her, she wouldn't respond. I kept trying to get Laura's attention, pretending not to care, or getting a little angry. Embarrassingly, I even teared up a few times. But she started ignoring me completely. I became invisible in my own home. Teenagers are still in their rebellious phase. I'll just endure it a little longer. Eventually, Laura left for college, so maybe we could find a better balance. This year, Laura started working full-time. I hoped she would start to see me differently. With that faint hope, I quietly worried about her. During all that time, for about 7 years, she has been ignoring me the whole time. It seemed she maintained her pleasant personality outside, and she got engaged the year she started her job. What? A wedding invitation? One day, I found an invitation conspicuously left at the front door. Since the bride's name was Laura, it must mean she's getting married. Are you getting married? Congratulations.
Silence.
Laura? Even when she occasionally came home and relaxed, it seemed like she still couldn't see me. So, about your wedding. My presence was erased so naturally, it didn't even seem malicious.
Hey Dad, I picked the best meal for the wedding.
Oh, and it's an open bar too?
Of course.
I learned indirectly that the wedding was real and felt confused about whether to be happy for my child's big day. A mother has many roles to play at a wedding. Surely she would introduce me to her fiancé. But as the wedding day drew closer, I hadn't met him, and Laura and I still hadn't exchanged a word. I finally realized I had been expecting too much from her. One day, when I came home from work, I could hear Laura and Stephen's joyful voices from the living room. She has been coming often lately, perhaps because her wedding is approaching. I'm home. I raised my voice a bit. Their lively conversation suddenly stopped unnaturally. Even though they must have heard me, they ignored me. As I was about to step inside, I noticed a piece of paper at my feet. Oh, the wedding invoice. It was no coincidence that both the invitation and this invoice just happened to fall at the entrance. I picked it up and dragged my heavy feet towards the living room. I'm home. My voice trembled a little. No response. Laura averted her eyes, sneaking glances at me. She smirked slightly when she saw I was holding the invoice.
Hey Dad, don't cry at the wedding, okay? It's embarrassing.
Oh, I might cry. My precious little Laura is getting married. Just thinking about it makes me tear up.
Dad, stop it. It's too early for that.
Well, Laura was always close to Steve, even as her adult self. Even now, she was leaning on his shoulder and joking with him.
I was the one who changed your diapers, you know. It feels like just yesterday you were a baby. And now you're getting married. I'm happy, but it's complicated to see another man take you away. Any normal parent would cry.
Since I couldn't cry, I wondered if I was an abnormal parent. Looking back, maybe I wasn't normal. Steve was supposedly the stay-at-home parent, but he dumped all the troublesome tasks on me. He only spoiled Laura. No wonder she adored her kind dad and saw me as the villain. Still, she was my precious daughter. Even if I had to be the bad guy, I worried about her future. Ah, Laura. For the first time in years, I made eye contact with Laura. Her face, though in her early 20s, had deep lines between her brows and a mean expression. My precious daughter. I couldn't even think that in my heart. I felt a bit scared. It was as if a spell had been broken. I realized I had been overprotective. Maybe it's enough now, I muttered softly. But of course, no one even glanced my way. It seemed like it was time to let go of Laura. I had only received the wedding invitation about a month ago. The wedding day arrived in no time. An hour before the ceremony, my phone started ringing incessantly. The callers were Steve and Laura. They kept calling nonstop. Eventually, I received a message from Laura.
Why aren't you coming to the wedding? This is so weird.
Even through the text, I could feel Laura's anger and panic.
Get here now. Are you trying to ruin my wedding? Don't mess with me.
Words that were hardly fitting for such a joyous day.
Why aren't you answering your phone? Hey, Mom.
The sense of urgency seemed to intensify. She had called me Mom, and I was surprised that Laura still recognized me as Mom. When was the last time she called me Mom? In my mind, I replayed a child's lisping voice saying, Mom. I couldn't even remember if that was Laura's voice. I had been waiting for the day Laura would call me Mom again. But it's too late. Enough already. I'll just turn off my phone. I carefully avoided answering Laura's calls and turned off my phone. I was in a nearby hotel room. If I stayed at home, they might come to drag me to the wedding. So, I took refuge here. Lying on the soft and clean bed, I tossed aside my noisy phone. A few hours later, I turned my phone back on and saw missed calls, even during the wedding ceremony. It seemed they couldn't have the emotional wedding they wanted. I had an appointment with someone in the evening, so I headed to the hotel lobby. Scanning the spacious lobby, I saw a man with a troubled expression sitting on a couch in the corner. Sorry to keep you waiting, Eric. I greeted him, and he stood up and bowed deeply. The polite man was Eric. He looking like a good young man in his late 20s. He was Laura's fiancé. I'm sorry for the trouble this has caused.
No, not at all. The wedding was canceled just before it was to start, and I'm grateful to you, Amy.
I was about to sit on the sofa opposite Eric when loud footsteps echoed through the quiet lobby.
Why? Why?
And then there were shouts. I turned around to see Laura, nostrils flaring and baring her teeth, storming toward me. Behind her was Steve, seething with anger. They seemed to have their eye on Eric because I wasn't at home and I didn't respond to any calls. Maybe Eric's unusual behavior made them think he was hiding something, so they secretly followed him.
Damn it. I knew something was up. He kept saying, we can't have the wedding without your mom. So insistently. You two were in on this from the start, weren't you? Damn you.
She spat out her words with a fierce tone. I knew she had a sharp tongue, but the intensity reminded me of someone truly frightening, and it made me shiver for a moment. I glanced to my side and saw Eric with his mouth agape, looking like he was about to cry. Anyone who had led a fairly ordinary life wouldn't be used to being yelled at like this. She has absolutely no tolerance.
Laura.
Eric's raspy voice snapped Laura out of her rage. Her eyes, which had been narrowed, widened into big, round circles, and her stance shifted from bow-legged to pigeon-toed.
Oh no, it's not like that. I was just so shocked.
It was too late to completely change her demeanor. Eric backed away from Laura, who was now blinking her eyes and trying to get closer, his face pale. Laura realized she couldn't cover it up any longer. More than trying to smooth things over, she was eager to confront me. She relaxed her cute face and showed her almost natural expression.
So, what's going on here? Were you, oh, Mom, friends with Eric?
Silence. I thought I heard Mom, but I pretended not to hear and looked up at the chandelier in the lobby. It was so exquisite and out of the ordinary.
Hey, are you listening? Are you really in cahoots with Eric? My wedding got canceled because of you.
Silence. A rich aroma of coffee wafted through the air. I suddenly wanted a cafe latte and turned to Eric. Hey Eric, how about we grab a coffee in the lounge?
What?
Before Eric could respond, an annoying noise cut through.
You. Oh, Mom. I'm talking to you, Mom. What do you mean, coffee? Don't ignore me.
Silence. Laura's face twisted in frustration, and even saying Mom seemed to infuriate her. Unable to contain herself, Laura grabbed my shoulders with both hands and shook me. My head swayed, but I didn't mind and put my index finger to my lips, thinking, maybe I'll have cheesecake with my coffee.
Hey, Mom.
Twisting her body, Laura kept calling me Mom.
Stop ignoring me. Why are you ignoring me? Say something.
Silence. Steve, who had been intimidated by Laura's intensity, finally joined in to support her.
Do you think you'll get away with ruining Laura's wedding? Apologize to Laura. Come on. Stop being silent.
Silence. I just wanted my coffee. That was all I could think about. Something was happening in the quiet lobby, but I didn't care.
Hey, are you listening?
Mom, how long are you going to ignore me?
Silence. Laura's eyes started to fill with tears, and her grip on my shoulders weakened. I looked away and let out a small, bored yawn.
Mom, what is wrong with you?
It was Eric who finally spoke up.
Enough already. Laura, I've heard everything from Amy. You and Steve have been ignoring Amy for years.
That's...
Laura stammered.
Is it true that Amy was always busy with work and didn't care about you? And when you did see her, she would only complain, basically abusing you?
Yes, that's right. She didn't even come to my wedding out of spite. It's awful, isn't it?
Laura nervously fidgeted with her fingers.
She wasn't invited, so it's only natural she didn't come.
What?
Eric turned to me and gently asked.
You weren't invited to the wedding, were you, Amy?
Yes, I wasn't invited. I knew my daughter was getting married, but she's always been messy and leaves things lying around. The wedding invitation was just tossed at the entrance, so I picked it up to check it. I just picked up the trash that had been left lying around. I wasn't invited, so I had no reason to be yelled at for not attending. Sorry, but I saw the personal information on that trash and contacted the groom, Eric, which brings us to now. Eric, you mentioned the wedding is canceled. Does that mean the engagement is off too?
Yes, that's correct.
That's a relief. Marrying a woman who treats the house like a trash can would be a nightmare. Laura was so shocked and angry that she couldn't speak. She took a deep breath and managed to curse at me.
So you really spread lies to ruin my wedding. You're the worst. You ruin your child's happiness, and you still call yourself a parent. See, just like I said, she's an abusive, horrible parent. She wants to make her child miserable.
If you only heard Laura's side, I might seem like a terrible parent, and it would be hard to tell who was right. But Eric already knew who was telling the truth.
Laura, you made yourself miserable. I've seen the videos Amy showed me of your daily behavior. No matter how much she tried to talk to you, you completely ignored her. So, who's the worst? It's you, Laura.
What?
Since Laura pretended to be sweet outside, I showed Eric her true colors beforehand. If she had hidden her true self and pretended to be nice for marriage, it would have been deceitful. Even though it was right before the wedding, I had to act to protect Eric.
That's awful.
What's awful? Laura herself?
Eric's gaze was cold.
It's all lies about Amy mistreating you, right?
No, it's not a lie. She's always so annoying, telling me to pick up my socks, not to drop chips on the couch, do my homework, stop playing games, and eat my vegetables.
Laura could have exaggerated more, but she only stated the facts. It was clear that these were genuinely annoying to her. However, what she called abuse was just normal parental advice, and Eric seemed exasperated.
So, you ignored her and excluded her from the family because she was annoying? She's just a normal mom. It's a blessing to have a mother who cares enough to nag. If she didn't care, she would have just let you be.
Steve scoffed as if it was ridiculous.
Ha! She was just taking out her work stress on Laura. I raised Laura with love, and she never rebelled against me. There's a reason she hates Amy. The mother failed at parenting.
Feeling superior, Steve looked down on me with pride. But Eric calmly continued.
If you spoil anyone, they'll cling to you. True love is disciplining, even if it means being hated.
People naturally drift toward the easier path. It was only natural that Laura preferred Steve over me. No matter how much I tried to guide her, it was meaningless if Steve always undermined it. As a result, our parenting had clearly failed.
Laura, we should call off our wedding. We haven't submitted the marriage license yet.
No, no way. I don't want that.
Laura clung desperately to Eric. She hugged his waist like a child throwing a tantrum.
But this has nothing to do with Mom. I only ignored her because she was mean to me. She was always bossy when she gave me money and kept telling me things I hated. That's why it didn't work out with her. It'll be different with Eric.
No, it'll be the same.
Eric lowered his eyes slightly. The Laura he loved enough to marry turned out to be a different person inside. It's a reality that's hard to accept easily.
I happened to overhear some of Laura's coworkers talking at the wedding today. Laura, is it true that you quit your job?
Oh, well.
Laura's eyes darted around. That was as good as admitting it.
They said you quit because you told them it was sad to have to work. You said marrying me was your permanent job.
Oh, well, that's.
Apparently, Laura was going to switch her parasite from me to Eric.
Living off your spouse's income. You were planning to live like Steve, huh?
No.
Eric glared at Laura.
You quit your job without even discussing it with me. There's no excuse for that.
Laura ground her teeth. She clearly wanting to shout, but keeping her composure. She didn't want to lose Eric. Or more accurately, she didn't want to lose her meal ticket.
I threw shame and decorum aside and talked to your coworkers. They had a lot to say about you. First, you marry a naive, kind, but dumb office worker to stabilize your life. Then, you leisurely search for a high-paying man. You boasted about this plan at work, didn't you?
Eric muttered self-deprecatingly.
So I'm the naive, kind, and dumb office worker.
Even if the atmosphere was strange, it was a wedding. Normally, people wouldn't say things that undermine the bride's reputation. But I could guess that her coworkers had reached their limit.
They told me everything. You ignored the low-paid guys at work, but clung to the handsome senior. Even after we got engaged, You were constantly at mixers looking for men. They said you were bragging about having 3 boyfriends besides your fiancé. Was that supposed to make you look good? Everyone was horrified. You put all your effort into chasing men, but you had no intention of doing your job, planning to quit soon anyway. Laura, you've only been working for a few months, and everyone already hates you.
Laura's face turned bright red. Maybe she hadn't realized she was disliked. And now, with tear-filled eyes, she crouched down. Judging by her reaction, she might have genuinely believed she was clever and charming. How self-centered can someone be, with no regard for others' feelings?
Sorry, but I'm not dumb enough to get married knowing I've been deceived. The wedding is off. I have several photos of your infidelity from your coworkers, and I'll be suing for damages. Since the wedding was canceled because of you, you'll also be paying for the wedding costs. Agreed?
Laura let out a wail-like cry. She was firmly rejected and had no place to turn. Even she understood that flattering and making excuses would be pointless now, so she just cried and wailed.
A man who can't silently support his wife is worthless. We don't need you. I won't let my daughter marry a man as small as you.
Steve finally found his voice. He tried to sound like a stubborn old man, but it lacked force and was somewhat restrained. He knew who was at fault, but he was just putting on a brave face. At home, Steve was always domineering, but he wasn't truly strong. Looking back, during his time as a manager at the diner, he worked excessively because he couldn't properly manage the staff. He couldn't even ask, "Can you cover this shift?" and ended up sacrificing himself.
You're suing for damages? Fine. But infidelity damages are usually around $10,000 for married couples. For cheating before marriage, maybe $200 or $300. That's just pocket money. Do you need charity? Hilarious.
Steve laughed mockingly at Eric.
And don't worry about the wedding costs. Our breadwinner here will cover it.
He only relied on me in such situations. He casually came close and slapped my back. I stayed silent and took a card out of my bag. I raised it to face height and then let it flutter to the floor.
Huh? A social security card?
Steve picked it up from the floor and tilted his head. Then his face turned pale.
Wait, your name isn't Amy Thompson anymore? You're using your maiden name. Why?
Silence. Why? Because I divorced you. There was no need to explain, so I stayed silent.
Oh,
He realized it immediately.
you? Did you submit the divorce papers?
Silence. A long time ago, when Laura was still in preschool, I had asked for a divorce. Steve didn't work and was a drain on our finances. Young Laura adored the indulgent Steve and started to resent me. I knew I had to get away from Steve, but Steve insisted he would never let go of Laura.
Fine. I'll sign the divorce papers. If you want a divorce, go ahead. But Laura stays with me. You'll never see her again. But I wonder if I can raise her properly by myself because I am too sick to work. I have no choice but to take Laura with me to the other world.
With that threat, he handed me the divorce papers. I didn't care what happened to Steve, but I couldn't submit them with Laura as a hostage. About 20 years passed. I had completely lost patience with Laura and finally felt free to submit the divorce papers.
No, this can't be. A sudden divorce is a problem.
Is it about the money?
Of course it is. I just started going to a hair restoration salon last month. What about next month's payment? Oh,
Steve clapped his hand over his mouth, realizing he had said too much. I was astonished that he was so openly worried about money.
You've lived an easy life until now. but being abandoned at your age must be tough.
Eric gave Steve a look of supreme pity.
Luxuries like hair restoration are out of the question now. You'll have to work to help pay Laura's damages and the wedding costs.
Steve covered his thinning hair with both hands, looking like a barren winter tree. Eric, let's go have that coffee now. I feel refreshed after something good happened, so I'll treat you.
What a coincidence. I just cut off a bad relationship and feel great too.
Ignoring the despairing Laura and Steve, Eric and I smiled at each other, as if in another world. I continued to ignore them.
Mom,
Amy.
Well, a delicious coffee was waiting for me. Without a glance at the two slumped figures, Eric and I left. An hour later, feeling content with coffee and cake, I saw Laura and Steve waiting. The thought of more whining was irritating. Steve was now a stranger since we divorced. I didn't care if I never saw Laura again either. But this time, things seemed different. Their shoulders were completely slumped, and their mouths were open. They looked too drained to even put up a fight.
why?
Laura was holding several wedding gift envelopes. They had been roughly opened and were torn.
I have so many friends who came to the wedding. All my coworkers came too. But
The envelopes fell to the floor.
none of them had any money in them.
Laura, abandoned by both Eric and me, was stubborn by nature. She might have planned to use the wedding gifts to pay for the damages and wedding costs, thinking she could make us eat our words. But the envelopes were all empty. From what Eric had told me earlier, it was clear Laura wasn't liked at her workplace. She ignored all men except the handsome and wealthy ones. She saw herself as special and treated other women like dirt. It was no surprise that no one would give a substantial gift at her wedding. Perhaps they wanted to see what kind of man Laura had deceived. Or maybe they came to eat for free.
Why? My friends.
The men who seemed close to her likely wanted her body. The women probably never confronted her openly. Looking back, being nominated as class president in high school was likely just a way for classmates to dump responsibilities on her. Laura, who looked down on her female friends, was likely despised by them. The popular Laura, who was adored by men and surrounded by friends, was shattered. She lost her fiancé, her money, her job, her friends, and her pride.
Mom,
Laura clung to my waist, tears streaming down her face. A mother is supposed to comfort her child, saying, "It's okay," even when they fail. But mothers are human too. After being hurt for so many years, they can break.
Mom.
Silence. Ignoring someone doesn't cause physical pain. It doesn't cause injury, but it cuts deep into the heart. She should experience firsthand the cruelty of what she's done. I gently brushed off Laura's hand, and she fell back easily, landing on her butt. She didn't even have the energy to stand. Eric, I deeply apologize for the trouble my daughter caused.
Since I didn't go through with the wedding, I'm truly grateful to you, Amy.
I gave Eric a small nod. Well, I'm going back to my hotel room now.
What about your home?
Oh, it's a rental, so I've started the process to move out. I don't want to stay in a place filled with bad memories. My things are still there, but the movers will come tomorrow to take everything out. I see, Eric nodded. Steve, who was nearby, muttered, "Wait."
So where will Laura and I go?
Silence. Laura is already an adult. With 2 adults, I do not need to worry about their living arrangements. Well, good night.
Have a good night.
Eric and I waved calmly as we parted. Laura and Steve couldn't follow us or call out to stop us. They were too stunned to move. They had always depended on others, and now they had to walk on their own. But that wasn't my concern. Later, I moved into a small apartment and lived alone. The day after the wedding, I changed my phone number and address, so Laura and Steve had no way to contact me. Finally, I was free from them. I worked and did chores every day, just like before the divorce. I'm home. But there was one difference. Now, I had a cheerful greeting waiting for me. "Welcome home. Welcome home." A voice echoed in the room. "Yes, I'm home, Tweety." I had started keeping a pet parrot. The way it replied, "Welcome home," was adorable. Welcome back. Living with a pet that can talk was more fulfilling and happy than being with people who couldn't communicate. Recently, my coworkers even commented, "You seem happier." My second life was just beginning.